Good afternoon. I'm very obviously new to this stuff. So I guess I'll call us to order. Bobby, you're better at this than I am.
Well, I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank the TCOL staff for lending your support and direction and guidance as we get through this situation. And we're thankful for all the folks that are here to help us. We're especially thankful for those that are on the committee that chose to be part of the solution as we move forward.
See, I told you you're better.
We'll get Miranda to call roll.
Presiding Officer, Major David Dixon.
Here.
Assistant Presiding Officer, Constable Bobby Rachel.
Here.
Professor Patrick Boone.
Here.
Sergeant Joshua Fisher.
Here.
Officer Eduardo Garza.
Here.
Sheriff Eugene Bodie Hillhouse.
Here.
Officer Ramiro Montoya. James Pat Oberg.
Here.
Detective David Schreiber.
Here.
We have one.
You want to start, we can just start with quick introductions real quick. Let you guys introduce yourselves to each other if you don't know, and then some of our staff, we have attorneys that'll be committed to your committee, and then some of our staff that'll be helping you out. If you guys want to introduce yourselves to each other, and then we'll take a turn at that, and then we'll let you guys have it.
So I'm David Dixon. I'm with DPS. I've been a polygraph examiner for about 5 years. DPS was heavily involved with the passing of this bill. Most of y'all may know Walt Goodson. He's one of our colonels. He went and testified on this, and I did the bill analysis for this. We're very happy to have some requirements, and I've already sent the APA guidelines. So DPS has our own school, which we do 400 hours of TCOL credit for each year, and we follow APA and AAPP guidelines. And that's sort of where I would like to work towards making sure we're still in compliance. So that's me.
Hello, I'm Bobby Rachel. I'm a constable in Navarre County. Been a polygraph examiner. We've been a polygraph examiner, Pat and I have, for 23 years. I was also down there with Mr. Stevens and Walt when we testified about this. I was also at TDLR when we testified when we lost licensure a few years ago. And that has spurned our interest to create a level of standards and accountability for the work that we do. And so we're eager to do that and thankful for all those that are here.
I'm Detective David Schreiber from the Lubbock Police Department. I am primarily a crimes against children detective. I investigate crimes of sexual and physical abuse against children. I'm also a attorney. I practiced law for a number of years before I became a police officer, mostly in the areas of civil litigation and appellate law, and then later went on to become a police officer, detective, and polygraph examiner. And I'm the legal instructor for Pat School.
My name is Pat Boone. I'm a professor at Central Texas College, teach criminal justice. I'm a retired lieutenant from Killeen PD and retired out of Salado as a chief. Been doing polygraphs. Like I said, Bobby and I were roommates together at polygraph school, so we've been doing it a long time. And I'm really happy to see us get a licensing back because I was upset that we kind of the towel got thrown in a couple years back. So I was excited about getting on this board.
Hi, my name is Pat Oberg. I'm retired from the Texas Department of Public Safety. Currently, I'm a polygraph school director. I've been a polygraph examiner for 43 years. I past president of the American Polygraph Association. I'm still working on some boards, some committees. I do polygraph research on accuracy and credibility assessment, and I'm currently in private business now, teaching.
I'm Bodie Hillhouse. I'm sheriff of Henderson County. Been the sheriff. It's my third term, and then I'm fairly new to polygraph. Just graduated Polygraph Institute back in April. Done several examinations, but honored to be able to be picked on this board and I agree there needs to be some kind of standard, some kind of licensing. So thank you for having me.
My name's Ed Garza. I went to Squirrel Police Department. I previously retired from the Texas Department of Public Safety, been a polygraph since 2014. Also active member with Telepi for a number of years, and I've applied for this position just so we can get uniformed and set some standards for polygraph examiners within the state and continuing education and some type of internship to where they're supervised and released until they pass the practical exam to be released out on their own. Thank you.
Sergeant Josh Fisher, Waco, been an examiner since 18, Vice President Telepi under Bobby. Just kind of want to represent our members, make sure we're heading in the right direction with it.
Mark Duncan, Assistant General Counsel, TCOL staff and legal department's kind of here to help maybe draft the rule or interpreting jurisdictional issues.
And Aaron Heath, another Assistant General Counsel here at TCOL.
TJ Vineyard, I'm over the Compliance and Standards Division here at TCOL, so I have 2 teams of field service agents and 2 teams of enforcement investigators and support staff.
I'm Gretchen Grigsby. I'm the Director of Government and External Relations here at TCOL, so worked with several of the members in this room on this bill during the legislative session and look forward to the work that y'all are going to put together.
Cullen Grissom, I'm over the licensing and education section. So anything that comes out in terms of setting training standards or examination standards, if it's a state exam, would fall with one of my teams. So happy to be here.
And I'm Miranda Aguilar, legal assistant here at TCOL.
And I'm Greg Stevens. I'm Executive Director here at TCOL. And I'll say a couple of words real quick before we pitch it back over to you. One of the things, first and foremost, you've got a great team right here that is that'll be dedicated to you while you work. We've got top-notch attorneys and legal staff that'll be here to take notes and everything. Supported by other ones here. Shelley over here, you guys will have travel and finance stuff, and she's with that part of the agency to support you there. And then TJ is assigned particularly to this advisory committee as our staff representative, along with the attorneys. A little bit of background, I think all of you guys know this, again, but I do want to kind of call it out as you want to kind of look at the why or the what for, why did we stand up this advisory committee? And the overarching thing is whenever I first came to TCOL with our sunset legislation, it instructed TCOL to use advisory committees to accomplish and put into place, implement some of the statutes that had been passed, and that was a great model. Rather than what would be bureaucrats from Austin putting out edicts from the Capitol that impacted law enforcement across the state, from folks that have been removed from the practitioner viewpoint, it's more effective to bring in people from across the state geographically, from large agencies to small agencies, from sheriff's offices, constables, state agencies, police departments, as well as public members, people that are just out across the state from academia and whatever, to help craft new rules, craft new procedures. So that's the overarching reason for using advisory committees, right? So now for y'all's in particular, currently we have 2 advisory committees, really a third that has been going on for some time that's looking at officer health and wellness, things like that. But we just stood up yours and another one. We asked the commissioners for these 2 advisory committees, one to look at and help us make some changes and do some things with motor vehicle stops, your racial profiling reports, right? Again, we don't want to take a bureaucratic approach to make improvements there. So we have that advisory committee that's also ongoing that met at the same time that you guys were supposed to meet before the ice apocalypse, right? You guys got a little bit pushed, but y'all's in particular, we have this new statute that we have to implement. And we obviously, again, we don't want to do that as bureaucrats removed from the process. We want to bring in experts that many of y'all are, all of you are really, to help us craft the rules that are going to impact law enforcement from across the state. And you guys all know sort of the history of that. Several years ago, polygraphs in the state of Texas were deregulated. A lot of reasons for that. It's not really useful to look at the whys of all that. That's history. We want to look at it going forward. Some of the parameters, and again, I think you guys all know this, bass fishing tournaments and cheating spouses aren't really part of this. The state of, Texas is a state of, I think that there is a goal to have as little regulation as possible. And so in the private industry, that will remain unregulated, and we don't have any desire to get our fingers into that pie, right? But the legislature obviously agreed with DPS and with other folks related to this that when polygraphs impact law enforcement, be it for hiring, be it for criminal investigations, there probably does need to be some regulation. And so what this statute, the intention from us going over and testifying from Walt Goodson and others going and testifying is that it won't be a license. So I want to kind of make sure that we correct a little bit of that just real quick. It'll be a certification. Just like we have mental health peace officer certifications, we have other types of certifications. That's what the goal and the objective is, that before, and you can read through this, a peace officer conducts a polygraph for a law enforcement purpose. They have to have a certification that would come from TCOL. Now, how you achieve that certification is what we brought you here to help us with, what rules, what education standards, everything would qualify a person for that certification. And then but you've got a ton of agencies that may not have their own polygraph operator. So for that agency to have a pre-employment or a law enforcement related a polygraph, what are the standards and who can they use to conduct that polygraph, right? That's the guardrails. You guys, I think, are already familiar with that, but it's worth saying that's what we've brought you in here to help us work through, rather than TJ and I sitting in there, two folks who have never conducted a polygraph before. And as I was kind of facetiously, but not really saying, I've been administered or given a few polygraphs in my career, but I've never conducted one, right? So I don't know what I'm talking about, and I don't have that expert knowledge, but you all do, practitioners from across the state. I will say this, and so my final remark is, we had a lot of people put in for this. And so we go through those applications kind of painstakingly. We look at your history, your background. There were other people plenty qualified. There were some that maybe perhaps were not as qualified, but you've been chosen from a stack of people that put in for this. Some of the thought processes that went into that were, again, we need a good cross-section geographically. We like representation from state agencies, from constables' offices, from academia, from the private industry, right? We want to have a good mix of people to come and help us make that decision from y'all's perspective. So everyone's got equal footing that comes in, and then we look at who will be the presiding officer, the assistant presiding officer, and we talk to our presiding officer on TCOL, the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. Kim Lameau is the presiding officer appointed by the governor. We go through these applications and with her as well. And then we shop that also with the governor's office, right? So you've been vetted, we've looked over everything, and you've been chosen from a pile of those applications to make it here and to help us do very important work that will impact law enforcement throughout the giant state of Texas, which has by far the largest law enforcement industry throughout the United States, right? And we've committed the resources that you need to accomplish that work. Don't hesitate to call us. Don't hesitate to ask us for whatever support you may need. TJ is kind of your main point of contact. Cullen is instrumental as well, but we've assigned him to be on the other committee that we've stood up. But again, Miranda will be a key figure in this, making sure stuff gets done. You've got, I'll say two of our best, but really we have great, there's no of our best. We have great, you've got Dan over here, we have great legal, we have great attorneys, we have great legal staff. Abigail over here, all of them do really good work. So anything you need, we're at your disposal. And with that, if anybody else, any staff have anything? It's all yours, presiding officer. I'm supposed to be on a call with our presiding officer, so I'm gonna eject myself from this because I can only get in your way from this point on. So I'm gonna go get on that call with Chief Lameau, and there you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, you bet.
So I know one of the things that I emailed,
respect here too.
I emailed out to y'all was the APA guidelines, and that's what we follow at DPS for 400 hours. So that's what you do at yours is 400 hours, correct?
Yeah, for the accreditation.
Yes, so and so we file that with TCOL, and I think that starting out as broad as APA has their guidelines on what to teach, the subjects for those 400 hours would probably be the best guidelines. I'm not saying that, I know that you have reservations about some of it, right?
No, I don't. So let me back up. I was on the APA board. I actually passed and developed a policy for the APA to actually be accredited as an accreditor. So there was a process that went into that. So they developed similar to a regulatory authority, but being a private entity, they developed a process. I'm very satisfied with the education, the EAC Education Accreditation Committee. I'm very satisfied with that. I think that gives access to schools into the process for the APA for how schools are accredited. I'm real happy with that. I would only tell you my reservations don't go into that portion of the actual school and training.
We had some, so what was it? What, right?
You want me to do a deep dive into it, I will. I didn't want to take up time.
Well, no, so I wanted to start with the easiest method is there's already an outline in place that they have.
Okay, so let me
That's
give you
where-
some back history then. So there's an education committee that deals with accreditations of schools. There's two documents, one of which is an ethical policy that the APA has, which is like, don't be a bad person. And then there's another document that's called standards of practice. I have big headaches with the standards of practice in regards to screening tests. And so when we look at polygraph tests, there's two principal types of tests we run. One is a criminal specific test over an event, an armed robbery or a crime. The other is a screening test for law enforcement purposes. So if we look at documents that talk about the validity of polygraph, the accuracy of polygraph, event specific is fairly well supported. We have enough research to deal with that. The other document that talks critically of polygraphs, the National Academies of Science 2003 report. So if you do a deep dive into polygraph accuracy, you'll pull that up. And so I was kind of looking to see if people would comment on public accuracy of polygraph. We don't have a lot of research to vet screening tests. And that's principally because of the way we conduct screening tests. Whereas if we have an armed robbery, it's like, did you rob the 7-Eleven last Friday night? A screening test, we take a much more ambiguous approach to relevant question. Have you ever committed a serious crime? Have you lied on your application? And the meanings of those relevant questions is very much weakened in the process. So 2, 3, 4 years, we've been fighting this in the research process with both APA and AAPP. We've discussed the accuracy concerns about screening. And I've actually visited with Walt at some point. I said, look, when we're going with this, are we going to talk about successive hurdles and polygraph accuracy? Because what I don't want to do is to lose the public's confidence in screening polygraph tests that they're actually an accurate format. Walt and I were in very much of an agreement with it. So we wrote a policy for AAPP. I just published an article 3 weeks ago, 4 days ago, however long the APA magazine was, that says how the meta-analytic survey doesn't support screening tests. And so from a process of how you actually do a screening test, it's going to require successive hurdles that's you're very familiar with because DPS does it in this way. But not everyone does. So there's other people who do polygraphs that take shortcuts to the process for whatever reasons, as well as people who are using alternative technologies that are very suspect in terms of their accuracy in the process. So my real concerns are, I'm really not too worried about investigative tests. It's not a big concern. Now, clearly there are people who violate the standards or the best practices that are out there. But the process right now is I know the APA board and AAPP board are both evaluating how do we deal with screening accuracy in supporting that. And from that, those of you non-polygraphers are going, what are y'all talking about? We know that a single issue polygraph test is a very accurate test whenever we have a specific issue. The process of screening, though, sometimes is that we water that down because they want to cover a large variety of topics. And if a person passes the test, then that's great. You know, they cleared all the issues. But in the screening process, when they don't clear that process, then you really require successive hurdles testing in order to ensure that there's an accurate polygraph, that we're actually saying this person failed over drugs or serious crimes or whatever. So my real headache right now or concern is, and essentially a number of board members have acknowledged, we have a problem with how we deal with screening tests. Where that's going to go right now is like the $1 million question right now. I don't know what they're going to write. I'll send the article that I just published about how screening accuracy is not there. And so, you know, we can generalize from single issue event specific, but that's not what we do in screening. So we have to be cautious about how we ensure, because I don't want to lose screening polygraphs. I mean, they're extremely valuable. So there's my sticking point, if you will. And so that's why that draft of best practices was sent to you that was already sent to AAPP.
So I think do you have some?
No, go ahead.
Go ahead,
So,
Josh.
but what you're talking about is actually what's being taught in school, not the requirements for this bill though.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So you're talking about what, like, let's just say your school. Like what you're, it doesn't matter as long as you pass whatever this advisory committee says, because that's all this is. Right?
I'm not sure I'm following the question.
This doesn't talk about specific tests. This just talks about the training requirements.
Yeah, I think, to me, if I can just jump in.
If we're just talking about training requirements, there's broad requirements set.
Right. And I think that's what I feel like we're here for.
Yeah,
That's go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think we need to, before we get bogged down real quick, I think we need to look at, right now, this committee needs to look at setting a set of minimum standards. And if we look at what these minimum standards are regarding the House bill in its entirety, if we focus on that and build upon that, as what you're talking about, as studies come out, as more data analysis comes out, we can word this so that we continue to follow those protocols.
I agree with you.
And I think as long as we do that without tiring ourselves in a corner, I think we'll be very successful with this moving forward, without having to convene every time APA or AAPP add something. If we put some language in there, if you will, that says these are going to be the minimum standards for these individuals that they have to have for the administration and the education of polygraphs.
Yeah, I was dealing strictly with administration. The school training process has some hiccups that are going on right now because of a study that they did with school directors scoring tests. It was a train wreck. They stopped the study and there was some discussion. The APA is going to have about schools and proficiency and competency testing for school directors. So I would tell you that there's a lot of stuff that's kind of bubbling up in the air right now.
So to go back on Josh's point, so that's where I'm saying we start with 400 hours that we're gonna do.
Oh, I'm,
'Cause that-
yeah. no,
And then we were broad on, so we have to have, for APA, we have to have 40 hours of psych. 40 hours of that is physiology, but it's broad in that what the requirements are for those 40 hours of each.
Yeah, there's some core objectives in there that are a little, they're there, but they're modestly
Yeah.
weak.
So that's what I think we wanna do is 400 hours and be broad on what the hours are. So that when there's changes that you're suggesting, it can be made without having to rewrite TCOL's guidelines.
Yeah, I wouldn't touch the number, and 400 hours is probably gonna be consistent for a while. I don't see that changing. They tried to change that about 18 months ago. Nobody really had an interest. The school
Did they try to
training.
change it down or did they try to change it up?
Well, here's where here's what they're doing right now. They don't like that everything had to be in residence. So I would tell you that the federal government says, why do we gotta do psychology and physiology in residence? And as any of y'all know, that when we hold your head underwater and teach you the psychology and physiology, everybody hates it. The federal government went through a plan to do that where you can do it online. And so the APA has always resisted that in the past, but since federal government's federal government, they're like, oh, we'll let y'all do it. So there's been they currently teach psychology and physiology in distance education. And they haven't allowed anyone else to do that. So I don't see any big changes in the training and the hours, other than some of it distance or in residence.
Y'all don't allow any distance, do you? Or you have, TCOL has very strict guidelines on distance learning, don't they?
It's really dependent on the topic area, whether it lends itself. We have a manual that we've published saying the following things can't be, like you can't do a basic SWOT course online. That's oversimplifying, but you've got a couple of concepts. You've got blended learning where portions are online and portions are face-to-face, traditional delivery, apprenticeship, however that model needs to look. So we're not opposed to some or all of things being online as long as it lends itself to doing that. So we're open either way.
Yeah, TJ.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, if I could have a couple minutes. First, I apologize. Aaron and I were witnesses in a murder case and we're on standby all week. And of course, they're texting now that they need us to go down. We knew this would happen. I do want to make sure. I do want to make sure the group is clear. There's kind of different avenues. And so we have to create a rule about certain things that are in here about how agencies can use those and how peace officers can do it. But we don't have to put everything in the rule. So for example, we create a certificate requirement, but you must complete the courses as identified by TCOL. You could say a minimum 400 hours, but then Cullen can develop the IRG, the course outline. We can adjust that outside of rule if there are changes where you want to add certain number of hours, you want to add a topic, but that doesn't require us to go back in, change a rule, take it in front of the commissioners, right? So we would structure it where there's certain requirements in rule for the people to get the certificate. There's certain requirements for how agencies would use that, but then the actual coursework in that could be broken out where it's not in the rule, but it's still developed by this committee, if that makes sense.
I do have a question for y'all. It's the B part 2. It passes an examination administered by the commission. So does that mean every exam, like, so we have 2 different schools here. Does that mean our exam has to be evaluated by this commission for each time we do a school, we may update it?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So the exam parts fall on me. There's a couple of models. We can build a state exam like we do our licensing courses, where a corollary would be the investigative hypnosis. We have a state exam that you come to a TCOL training provider or exam site and do the hypnosis course. We didn't write the test. DPS actually wrote the test, but we administer it. So there's that option. If, you know, a different way to look at it is if you could impose that a school who's teaching this course, or our commissioners, let's put it in the context of making a rule. Our commissioners can impose by rule a certain type of accreditation to deliver the training. And as long as that accreditation included a testing model that meets whatever that standard is, then we could recognize that as meeting that language.
So Chief, if we use the model of an APA or AAPP accredited polygraph training, and we use that language, which there is testing, you know, in that phase and all of that, if we use that, then you're saying we don't have to sit down and have a discussion every time somebody adds something to that.
Yeah, if you look at, I'm trying to draw a correlate. If you look at the basic licensing course, we TCOL can go in and move everybody's cheese by changing the curriculum. All of our rules, all the statutes point to you must do this thing to get to a license. We can go change the thing behind the green curtain, roll it back out, and everybody from a given change point on is required to do that new curriculum. To put it in, it kind of, I think TJ touched on this a little. We don't always own the curriculum. In other words, there's not a TCOL instructor resource guide. We don't have one for Polygraph. We could build one if that's then any school that would have to use our instructor resource guide. It's not lesson plans, it's just gonna have objectives. If you think a TEA gives all the schools, you know, what do they call them now, TACs, the knowledge, skills, and abilities the students have to know on very broad levels. Now, that puts the burden on us to keep that IRG updated as the industry moves. If you slave it to an external accreditation, someone else who's already doing that, Mark, correct me if I get off. If you said you can go to an APA, for instance, accredited school, and whatever APA we recognize, Texas is recognizing that as some kind of national standard, external accrediting body. If the school meets that, we, Texas, would accept that as minimum requirements. If you go back to what the statute obligates us to do is set minimum training, okay? And that can be very narrow. It could be 400 hours, but it sounds like y'all want more, to be more explicit about the content. So you could say it must be minimum of 400 hours covering the following topics, but TCOL would not own the curriculum. We would not be responsible for the curriculum. You can put that off. A good example that everybody in here is probably familiar with is NHTSA owns SFST. We give a proficiency certificate for SFST instructors. We don't own the curriculum. We don't produce it. We don't produce the test. We give a proficiency certificate. NHTSA, in all of its wisdom, keeps that thing refreshed and upgraded, and things, standards change. And so that happens external to us. We're just slave to it. So if you lose your NHTSA certification, you lose your TCOL certification. And so that's kind of one of the theories on managing it.
Yeah.
My fear with tying stuff to APA, let's say he gets upset with them off your studies and he decides he doesn't want to be accredited, he's gonna stay AAPP. Then if we stay off APA standard, and he can't certify anybody in Texas, because when I can't be APA because when I went through TPS, it wasn't accredited.
Yeah, but we're not saying, we're saying we keep the training.
Right, like, yeah, I'm saying we don't mention APA, we just use.
Yeah, no,
that's-
yeah. My other question before we really go further is everybody grandfathered in? Because like he's an issue, I'm an issue, both of us are issues because we
I
didn't.
was
go-
licensed.
Oh, you were before, so I'm after,
Yeah, I was licensed.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, there's a way to write that. I was on the board at the APA, and so we wrote that. There's a way to write that and craft it so that if you said an APA accredited school or one that substantially meets the same curriculum standards, because the APA attorneys were worried about antitrust. And so they wrote a standard. Now, that person would then have to solicit TCOL or whoever and say, I went to this school, it did the technology, the psychology, whatever the topics were. And you solicit and say, look, I'm asking for an exception because I met the same standards, but at the time, the school you went to may not have been accredited. We had the same problem at the APA with
DPS for like 2 years. What was it, 2 years?
Yeah, there was 2 years, but RCMP in Canada was like 6 years.
When I applied for APA, they said no.
There's a way around it.
But so sir, is everybody grandfathered in? That, or are we all gonna have to apply?
Rules not written. So, I mean, there could be.
That's the point that I was trying to make, is that if we use anybody who attended an APA, an AAPP, accredited school would qualify for this. Because we are gonna deal with, I mean, he was right, we have more police officers in Texas than we do in any other state. We have more polygraph examiners in Texas than we do in other states. So, you know, we wanna make sure we get this right, because other people are gonna look to us that don't have licensure as to what we're doing. And so we wanna get this right. And so most of these folks are grandfathered in. Michelle, how many people do y'all have in class right now?
11.
They've got 11 police officers that are in the academy right now to become polygraph examiners. Pat, you got a school going on?
I just started it yesterday, I have 10.
Okay, so there's 21 people. How many of those are law enforcement?
All.
So we got 21 law enforcement officers that are training right now to become examiners. So we want to get this right.
Well, and I can very easily overcomplicate this, so let me know. I think there are multiple paths open to you. One is to say, TCOL would write the rule to where you must pass a TCOL approved course. That's very commonly used in the rules. That gives us flexibility. Now, what that does is it puts work on us to say, he's gonna submit some application that says, okay, you're TCOL approved, so he goes in the approved bucket. And DPS is doing their own, so they submit to us and say, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it. And we go, okay, DPS is in the approved bucket. Now, I have no idea, I'm not a polygrapher or play one on TV. I don't know how many training providers, legitimate in your mind, training providers there are out there. If we wrote the rule to say TCOL must approve the school rather than attach it to an accreditation, I think that kind of what you're saying, Sergeant, is if, you know, I didn't go to an accredited school, but I got the training from somebody who is now accredited, we can certainly have language from this forth on. I mean, we've got, you know, Mark and Dan and Aaron and the gang are clever about trying to capture people we want to grandfather, things we want to recognize, you know, so that we certainly can look at some means by which people who are successfully doing it can continue to do so. And then it becomes, here's what the training requirement is going forward. Current practitioners normally would not have to retest, you know, unless it was built into the rule. So I think we've got some flexibility. Mark, any wisdom on?
I mean, I do see the original point of them explicitly saying administered by the commission, but you're right, we have flexibility. If we have control over the exam, that's kind of what they're getting at, right? Kind of like BPOC's a good example. You were saying we have a standard and we have the ability to say that somebody meets it or does not, and that's enough, I think, hands in the pie of that test to count it, if that's how you want to do it.
Well, and I want to kind of piggyback on what Dave said a while ago. For their school, they do submit a lesson plan to TCOL for approval.
They don't. I can tell you they don't.
Well, I have 400 hours on my T-Club license.
No, they submit a roster after the fact documenting the training, but I have not, cause I've been in this job for 9 years. I have not seen, they don't submit the lesson plans, for our approval prior to delivery. CPS has delivered it for years and years. All we get is a roster from them because they're a training academy. And they report after the fact the 400 hours. So that's all we see right now.
So it's about the person and the hours as opposed to the topic.
For compliance, for us to look for compliance, yes.
Okay.
But if we wrote the rule to where only certain providers could provide the training, what it would be is that person would have to apply to us showing that they graduated. So it would probably be an individual officer application saying, I went to school X. School X is on the approved list. School X is authorized to test if we don't want the state to do a state licensing type exam.
Right.
Then we would authorize the school to both train and test. And then we would say, yes, 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 check all the boxes. We would issue that person the proficiency certificate.
Okay. Was your school accredited with anything? Okay.
Because we had the licensing.
Well, it was recognized by AAPP.
Yeah, probably.
AAPP had a recognition process where they recognized those 2 years.
Followed that protocol then.
Yes.
So that covers that.
I mean, I followed everything I needed to pass the licensing for state.
Okay. So we also need to look at, we have a ton of peace officers that are moving to Texas from other states. So we'll have to address the reciprocity part to this that addresses, if you get a police officer from Oklahoma that has gone to a similar type school that meets the same standards and moves to Texas and wants to do this, so we need to add that component as well.
Well, and I think something, and we can get further down the road, but you have people who are not peace officers potentially who are going to want to do this. And the simplest example is all of the federal agencies. None of them are peace officers in Texas mine. So a retired FBI.
You do have some civilian examiners in state who've never been a police officer.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
And
There's a lot of agencies with civilian,
Exactly.
including fire departments. A lot of the fire department examiners are civilians. And some of them are retired too. They retire and now they're civilian.
So
They're no longer gun toters or badge carriers.
correct. And so that's just an aside that, you know, even though the statute says peace officer, peace officer, peace officer, peace officer, but I think the industry has a legitimate concern that there are some folks who probably ought to be in this workspace that aren't gonna have and never have been Texas peace officers. And so
I think that's kind of my question is as we go through this, how far does sort of the tendrils of this expand out to where if you have somebody who is, say, doing polygraphs for a defense attorney, are we gonna come in and say they're doing work in a law enforcement space because these exams have the potential to touch prosecution? Now they've moved into this regulatory sphere and now we can say you now must comply with the TCOL requirements.
here's, Mark, help me if I get off. Here's what the law says and what the law is silent on. We only regulate, we TCOL only regulate peace officers in this context. We have some regulatory authority over anybody we issue this certificate to. So if it were broadened to include people who are not peace officers, we have the ability to remove this certificate from them. Nowhere in the statute does Cullen read a prohibition to someone outside doing these two things. If I don't get the TCOL certification and I hold out a shingle doing pre-employment examinations for peace officers, there is no prohibition. Yes, sir.
I do them. I have a private business. I do pre-employments for agencies and I am retired, so.
Yeah, this is a very narrowly written statute.
It does not, it also does not address internal affairs polygraphs.
You are correct. Unless it bleeds into the notion of criminal investigation.
Usually most of those are IA, not criminal.
Yes, sir.
That was kind of it's no secret, I was in opposition to the bill. I was worried about what would happen to people who are in private who do work for law enforcement, and we were told, well, there's no possibility that would extend this, because I certainly want to do polygraphs that are in compliance, but I also wouldn't want to say, well, you can't because, you know, you've got gray hair now and you don't carry your badge anymore.
It's not limited to licensees to get the certificate. That's the minimum standard here, but certainly we can open it up to anybody who's done this can get a certificate, whether licensed currently or not.
Yeah, basically, and again, my reading of the bill, and I was talking to Gretchen, our government relations person earlier, is this says if you are a peace officer, then you have to do this. If you are not, doesn't say anything. You know, so, and this doesn't restrict agencies. So it doesn't say the chief sheriff or constable can't use someone who is not a peace officer. So again, it's kind of nitpicking, but it's very narrowly written. And so I think we have to, and that goes back to, you know, where do all the tentacles go? Well, if we get too far off, there's gonna be some tentacle chopping, is the concern.
So what if an agency were choosing to use some alternative technology? Historically in the state of Texas, voice stress has never been allowed, and it's because of its accuracy issues and its ability to do what it says. So an agency could say, you know, this is a lot of trouble to do polygraph. I'm just gonna do voice stress. You're saying that this, because I've had this conversation with Walt, that this would not restrict that?
This wouldn't, no.
So I think,
Really
I think where some of the confusion is because of the mandate that came out where TCO said agencies need to have a policy regarding the use of polygraphs. I think that's where some of this is starting to overlay. And, you know, is there going to be a standard that says if you're an agency, you need to use somebody that meets the minimum standards? Which I'll tell you that I think that's a hope, whether it's me or Pat or whoever, that whoever they're using meets the minimum standards of what we outlined here. I think that drives the bus for all the peace officers as well as the agencies.
Yeah, I agree, and I think most people, one, because having what we found historically across all other stuff, is having the TCOL certificate to do something is something that people run around waving over their head in marketing. I mean, that's how they sell themselves.
Of course.
So once we do it. We see it with firearms instructor, basic instructor certification, all kinds of things that don't really speak to your ability to do anything, but that's the first thing they put on their resume. Oh, I'm TCOL certified to be X. And I think if we focus on what does the training look like? Who provides the training? Who should we accept training from? And what does the testing look like? Those are the three key components in the bill to get to this proficiency certificate. I think once we arrive at that, then, you know, there's a couple of things that I don't think the chief covered. There's a couple of potential outputs from this committee is one, and one of the reasons we use this is if the committee collectively makes a statement on, we think this legislative change ought to occur, this bill is good, but it doesn't do X, then we can take that back via Gretchen and the boss to the Capitol and say, we impaneled this committee, this, you know, they did this thing required under this statute, but in the doing of that thing, they came to this conclusion that we probably need some subtle changes in whether it's employment practices, whether it's chapter 143 for civil service or wherever it is. But I think if we could kind of focus initially on what does the training look like, minimum standards, what does the testing look like, and who provides the training? Those are gonna be three key components.
But that's not in here.
Training, testing, and what else, sir?
Who provides the training?
Who provides it?
Yeah,
Oh, good.
who's a
I'm
reputable source of
I'm interested in that.
But it says not now.
But it doesn't even touch instrumentation either.
Nope.
So
Okay.
the question we're talking about is, it says the commission may, by rule, may establish minimum requirements for the training, testing, and certification of peace officers. So does that, can we also include continuing education?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, there's
Because you have the notion of some of our proficiency certificates last forever. They call them one and done. Some have recurring requirements. So if you put into the rule recurring requirements to maintain or to recertify, either of those could occur.
see, we do 40.
Be mandated to do a certain amount of hours within a specified period to maintain your certification as a polygraph examiner, just like you keep your TCO license with a certain amount of certification license. That would be something to administer.
There's prescribed continuing ed, it could be prescribed continuing ed, whether it's by hours or by certain topics or there can be more specificity. And it could be good for 2 years. It could be good for 10 years. I mean, there is that flexibility. Now, I'll give you my bias is if you build something that we have to go touch everybody every 2 years and make sure they're compliant and take their certificate away if they're not, that is a work function of ours. We're willing to do it, and we've got the resources, but that becomes a regulatory scheme for us that we have to.
If we do it on the 4-year cycle, with that, and with our licensure, with that.
Yeah, if you look at our business practice, we got two-year units, 4-year cycles. If it's slave to one or the other, that makes it simpler for us to look at compliance.
So 2 years is good. So 2 years could be good.
Yeah, two years, our standard training unit that peace officers are held to for continuing ed is 2-year unit. Two units make a 4-year cycle. Some things are slave to the unit, some are slave to the 4-year cycle.
I say 2 years sounds good because polygraph is so demanding and we just gotta be on top of it.
Well, APA recommends 30 hours every 2 years.
I have no bar by which
just,
to measure
for
whether
those that
that's
didn't know,
good or not, but
you know, just going by their standards.
So I know we need to schedule a meeting again, right?
Yeah, cause I'm
Yes.
still confused, so
let's-
an agency could say, that's really nice, y'all did all that, I'm just gonna hire the civilian and he's gonna do whatever he wants to do.
Hey, that's job
I
security.
can't rule out that potential.
That's job security for you, man.
No, that, look, I have a vested, I've been doing polygraph tests for 43 years and I do private tests for defense attorneys, nobody ever sees them, cause 99 of them fail and 1 passes. So I do polygraph tests correctly, if anybody's ever QC'd my work, and I'm like, I'm concerned of creating a black market of ugly polygraphs.
I think that what you were talking about is if the recommendation of the committee, once we draft the minimum standards, is that agencies use, if we could get some language for that, if they're going to utilize polygraphs, that they use someone, as Director Stevens was talking about, from the list that's certified.
I think most will. And you've got some other players, you know, in the sandbox. If the Texas Police Chiefs Association best practices and people that subscribe to that accreditation, or CALIA, point back to this and say, you're out of compliance with our accreditation if you do what you just described, get somebody from outside. There are still some who will do it, and there's some who aren't accredited. But, you know, if the Chiefs Association says, hey, we're all gonna do this, if Sheriff's Association and TAC say it's best practices to do this thing, most professionals are gonna do it. And so I think getting to the certification, getting peace officers and potentially others certified to do this, I think most people are gonna subscribe to. But I don't read in the statute where it precludes somebody from doing what you described.
I could solve with some other states and, I'm sorry.
We could do the rule that is what you want, like you can easily, we have a lot of control over pre-employment processes, right? So if this rule comes in saying that if the polygraph is used, you'll make sure they're certified, I mean, we have control over that process. The criminal investigation part is probably more, I think people mentioned model policy. We don't, or polygraph policy, we don't have a model policy for that right now. If that was a recommendation of the committee, that we set a minimum standard of your model policy must contain X, then it could say that agency can only use certified polygraphers.
Okay. Yeah. And I think with doing that language to do that, and I think like, for example, internal affairs, I think that was just completely overlooked. Just, it was missed. We need to add that component in there as well.
Bobby, so is it gonna be all standardized one particular examination test for every police agency, or they can pick and choose which examination they would administer to their new hire if they do institute the examinations?
We don't wanna dictate that.
No.
Because
I was involved with TDLR on writing the exam there. I did that for 6 years. I thought it was an ugly process. I would tell you that the schools already have a final examination that they give to the APA. It's supposed to be an approved exam, and I'm gonna assume that it is. But the schools are supposed to give their final graduation exam to the APA Accreditation Committee, and it's supposed to be approved. If somebody wants questions, I'll give everybody all the questions. It's an honor, it's not that onerous, it's just a lot of labor sometimes, but because it's minimum stuff. And actually what we do at the final exam of school is probably harder than what you would do as just to say you're minimally proficient.
Well, we're gonna try what you were talking about internship too.
Yeah.
So do we wanna look at that again?
But the agency could just choose to do a whole nother, see, this happens in Louisiana, they have a polygraph law. And then everybody says, well, hey, voice stress is real cheap, and so they use that for their cheap stuff.
See, we don't regulate, Texas is a local control state. And so we don't regulate a lot of processes of onboarding or hiring. The state doesn't. We TCOL don't, the state doesn't. There are people who use VPAD personnel, personality profiling. So they put them in front of cameras, and there's every new widget that comes out of higher ed somebody's convinced the chief, sheriff, or constable that they ought to insert this in their hiring process. Some of it's voodoo and witchcraft, Cullen's opinion, not the opinion of the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. But that goes largely unregulated. So voice stress analyzers, Ouija boards is not off the table.
I just share his concern that we're gonna end up in a universe where we have one group of examiners that are just regulated to death and another group of people that are just running around doing whatever.
Kind of like that.
Yeah.
So I have to contract in every once in a while when I'm getting too busy with other tests, and I had guys coming down from Dallas running 6 tests a day, and I had to fire them. So you can't do that here.
Yeah.
There's a major police agency that I know that's using an alternative technology cell phone. They look at this, they take a test online and then they pass. And I'm like, that's horrifying.
The recommendations that we make, that we talked about or adding into, agencies using someone that meets the minimum standards, that follows the protocols that we've set forth here. So what's the best way to do this? Can we vote on this in phases to try to move forward? Do we write it all up as once? What's the recommendation here?
I mean, there's several things we can do. If I contrast what we're doing, again, I'm sorry, TJ's not here because he's really your support on this one. But what we're doing in the traffic stop reporting committee is they diced the report, and they broke into subcommittees. And one subcommittee, one of the things I don't think we did too much is, and Mark, I may have you do a quick brief on quorums and communication. And there are things we can and can't do because this is an open meetings process. So subcommittees, less than a quorum, can do a lot of work. They can interact back and forth, they can share stuff. So what the other committee did was broke into subcommittees, and one took the reporting of the traffic stop, and one took reporting of contraband and those kind of things, and one took the miscellaneous other, because a lot of their work is defining things so that we're not changing the statute, and we can't. But we have to define things in reporting so that everybody in Texas is doing it the same, which is not happening now. So if you just spitballing, if you had a subcommittee that said, we're gonna work on who should be delivering the training, what schools, if we're gonna slave it to accreditation models, what accreditations have value. And so that subcommittee, say three people,
Is that the
we're going
max?
to look at that.
Is that the max we can do for sub?
No, you can't have a quorum, right? Because you can't meet with the majority outside the meeting. So as long as it's less than, and you wouldn't want to even accidentally kind of talk to each other and do a walking quorum. As long as it's less than the half,
Yeah.
We have 9, so 4 or less.
Yeah, so if you're 4 or less on your, and so if another subcommittee said, okay, we're gonna take on what the training looks like. Okay, so 400 hours, so you said, that subcommittee might say, here's what it looks like, here's are the major topics that must be studied, and then that would be brought back in theory at the next meeting. So the subcommittees would then report in. Then you can start movement on, okay, you discuss what the subcommittee's work did. If everybody's on board, we bless it and we say, okay, we make a statement. I move we do X. And, so that's one model. To kind of chop the elephant up into bite-sized pieces.
One more question and I'll shut up for a minute.
Maybe you don't.
Just for a minute. If we recommended that any person, because we talked about any police officer running exams, meet these. But if we change the language to, we recommended any person performing examinations for a TCOL certified agency meet the minimum standards. We would take in civilians.
I run tests.
What I'm saying, we would take in civilians that perform work full-time, part-time contractually with any TCOL agency and create a standard for them as well, so that you don't have the Ouija boards and you don't have the voice stress, because they can't do that.
Or 10 tests a day.
Or 10 tests a day, or eye detect, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, Cullen's right, it's twofold. I mean, within this scope of polygraph, you know, for the certification, I think we'll have some control about if you're going to do this, you'll need to do it by TCOL standards. If they want to do something outside of that, that's not really in this, we might not be able to regulate it, right? If they're doing something really weird, we can't tell them who to hire or not. We can tell them when they're doing polygraphs, you're gonna have to get somebody certified.
But that's not what it says. I think that's the point we're making, is that it doesn't say you have to use somebody certified.
Well, I mean, that's what this committee is gonna be deciding, right? There's ways to implement it. And so if you guys have a clear direction for us, one thing you might be doing here is saying, we definitely want a rule that says a certain amount of hours. We definitely want, maybe you want more policy, whatever it is, we can go back, start to draft something, bring it back to the next meeting, and you can all look at it and say, well, this is quite what we meant, or find ways to tweak it.
Yeah, one of the things taken on by a subcommittee is who would be applying for this? Statute says peace officers, but who might be appropriate people, you know, that are not peace officers who could achieve this certificate? By example, our mental health officer certificate can only be acquired by peace officers, jailers, and justices of the peace. It's restricted. And the statute actually added justices of the peace later, so we had to change the scheme. You know, so if, you know, not anybody in the world, you know, I can't wake up on Saturday, buy a machine off Amazon and, you know, go to the training and get it. If they have to have certain experience, federal, military, whatever, you could set who is eligible to achieve the certificate in the first place, regardless of training. What training do they get? And come up with a way to solve the testing issue. Is that put on the training provider? Really, it's a function of trust. Do we trust training providers to be valid means of testing their graduates? Or do we want the state, TCOL, to own the test, where we have to build a test and you come to one of our 60 TCOL test sites, you know, so. But those are things, I think that's a way to dice it up. What does the training look like? Who is eligible? And then ultimately the testing component. And who delivers the training?
Go ahead.
I was asking permission. Can we extend the definition of a polygraph examination to be any forensic test for the purposes of credibility assessment?
I mean, I don't have the answer to that. We can certainly make that recommendation. And
I know it's outside the scope of this, but you see where I'm going with this. There's some really, I don't wanna talk about it to the public, maybe there's some technologies that are out there that don't meet the standards for accuracy and reliability. And I don't think any of us wanna see those things being used. And yet that we might push an agency into using substandard, unless we can say, because of this, we wanna extend the definition of polygraph examination to include any forensic test for the purposes of credibility assessment.
Well, we're bleeding over into other rulemaking. Okay, so if you look, and this is kind of construction. If you look at our proficiency certificate rules, we have a rule that delineates, in fact, we've got one pending next week before the commissioners, it'll be proposed. It says who's eligible, what's the training requirement, what documentation does TCOL need, if that person meets all these, TCOL issues a proficiency certificate. Now, when you get into practice and use, you're modifying other rules. Chief administrators may not use X. That's in a different section of the code. So I want to keep this proficiency certificate rule. If you put a box around that in your mind, we need to keep that clean. If we want to recommend practices or look at other rules for potential modification, that's how are things put into practice. This rule needs to, the first rule needs to outline who gets a certificate when. And so I've got to kind of hope to have you narrow it to that. And then we can look at agency minimum standards is another rule. You know, obligations of chief administrators is another rule. You know, those are things that could potentially be modified. But we want a clean, descriptive, who gets to be a polygraph examiner, and who do they get it from, when do they get it? And it should be relatively simple in how they keep it.
There is a gray area, obviously, where some of this gets into legislative recommendations. Hey, you've done the first step, should we do more? And some of it's, where does our power end to regulate? Yeah.
So do y'all have generic language for, damn it, I forgot the word, bringing all of us over, for us getting certified, for us having a certification, the ones that already are examiners?
That could be part of the rule, based on what you suggest. I don't know. I don't see anything here that necessarily limits that. We might, once we set the standard of accreditation, we can look at whether, you know, if people already met that standard, then it counts. I think determining if we decide that TCOL needs to personally give the examination to conduct it by the commission, we might have to have people take that test. Or we might recognize previous tests. I don't know how, you got
So
my discretion.
that's my question, is so like, I'll just use me for example, I've gone through 400 hours and I've taken a test through our school, which is what everybody here did. So what would I need to do to be grandfathered in then?
I mean, I think you're gonna decide that here, right?
Right,
You
yeah.
decide- If you decide that you want,
So, but what I'm saying is, so do I have to send you something to get to my certificate? How do we go about getting that? That's where I'm
oh
going.
yeah, I mean,
back
There would probably, those who
'Cause y'all are gonna have a couple-
currently in the operating space, and when the rule comes in, it's pretty rare for a blanket grandfather.
Okay.
Somebody who went through 80 hours of training, but has been doing polygraphs for 62 years. And they're out there, you probably know some of them. Haven't done any continuing ed since their original 60 hours worth of training, they're gonna ask to be grandfathered in. So when you set the standard, you're probably looking at people currently in the working space, if they meet that standard, would still need to apply, and we would affirm their back going forward with the proficiency certificate.
All right, let's do this. We got 45 minutes. I know this is probably gonna take some time. Can we figure out a time for the next meeting? Do y'all think next month?
Oh, yeah.
We gotta have the recommendation.
Or in 2 weeks?
This is a less onerous task than I was predicting.
So that's what I'm saying, in 2 weeks or a month? We have the, so what do we think about March 9th? It's a Monday. I know y'all travel, Mondays, a lot of y'all traveling. Is that easier for y'all?
After this meeting, we can do them online too, can't we?
Mark?
Yes,
We can do them online, right?
we can attend.
you can choose to make it a hybrid meeting. You know, there will have to be a presiding officer at least in person,
Yeah,
but
sure.
everybody will have to keep their camera on, and it's possible to do that, yes.
So we're good with March 9th and we can do it
I'm on board, Dave.
at 1. That seems to be more convenient for most people.
Afternoons. Looking at TJ's calendar as your primary liaison, that looks good.
Okay.
Committing him to something.
And Miranda, you send out who sends out you, okay,
This
So-
is a face-to-face or?
And
both, it'll be both.
So it'll be hot.
Yeah. You good with that?
Yes, we need to take a vote.
Do you know how to turn on a computer?
Yes.
We got him trained this year.
Okay. So,
Make a motion and
are you,
make a motion, we hold our next meeting on March 9th, 1 PM. Either it can be remote. or
And we
face-to-face.
need what type of meeting it's gonna be.
a hybrid?
Hybrid.
Hybrid.
Second.
All in favor? Yes.
Vote till we close.
Thank you, sorry. All right, so we have 4 things we have to meet or go over, right? 4 things? I know you've been writing.
Yeah, and I don't have any of what the limitations of this, I'm like, oh, this is,
Well, so I have a task for you. That's where I'm going.
oh gosh, okay.
So what are your 4 items that you got listed there?
The training, the testing, and who can provide the training, those are the things.
So that's what, so I think if we do a subcommittee, I know you have 4 guys here, so 3, if you and 2 others can talk about the training, not the training, but the, who can do the training.
Okay, that's easy.
I think I can, in my group, can do the actual 400, what the minimum 400 are.
Yeah, I have no objections to any of that that's
So-
currently out there for either AAPPA, there's no problem.
I'll have it read up so we can vote on it next
Who
time.
can do the training? Okay.
But I'm saying I'm one of
Yeah, but we gotta at least
Put it all
list the
together.
minimum, that's what we'll do. So I'll take care of that. If you have 2 people that you wanna have on a subcommittee regarding what, the training for.
Who can do the training?
Yes, and then if you 3.
Okay.
Wanna do continuing education?
Okay.
And what is it, there's 1 left, what's the one that's left?
Who can get the certificate?
Yes. I can work on verbiage on that from my end.
Pat, are you on a committee right now? Or no? He could work on that with
Okay.
somebody.
Do y'all wanna work on that?
Yeah.
Okay. So are we good on all that?
You and Pat.
You seem upset.
No,
seem
I'm
befuddled.
like, this is a piece of cake. I thought we were gonna do something. I'm like, oh, this is not even.
I honestly think the grandfathering in and those requiremits are probably gonna be the one that catches us. So one of the things that actually I went and met with Walt Goodson about was up in your area, actually. Yeah, I think it was more Midland, Odessa. There was a guy who ran 6 different individuals on the same crime and ran like 6 tests on each of them, and he had never been through any training. So that was the push. So I see y'all's issues. I see what you're saying. I just don't know how we regulate that.
It's a great cottage industry doing QC work for DAs.
I think though that's where you're going too, is a DA by this is gonna be able to ask somebody on the stand if they've received TQual
That might be,
certification.
that's where I was really going with our standards of practice of what we're expecting. So that I'm not seeing silliness like multi-issue evidentiary and I'm like, this is not a test. And that the district attorneys who are naive to what we do, maybe we can at least set that out. I was hoping to have it more applicable to anybody, but this is easy, this is.
Can we clarify the 4 again? And which one of those is covering maybe testing and testing requirements?
I think the testing falls under actual training, the hours also.
Second
Yeah.
one, yeah.
So
Because
that-
that's the
yeah,
subject should be tested on, right?
Yep.
There's one issue, and since we're all here, I would wanna bring it up. And it
Michelle's
goes
taking
back to the issue with where we had some schools that weren't approved. If you really do a deep dive and go back, the 400 hours was imposed around 2012. somewhere in there, 2010. Before that, it was 320. And before that, and so assuming that we had some really old gray-haired people, what would you, I'm offering thought processes for your committees, like, you know, what would be the requirements would be, did they continue with their CEs? They went through a 240-hour school? You know, how would that work as, you know, some of those issues were brought up?
So on
How
that, I
many
do.
hours was your school?
400.
Yours was 400. Has DPS always?
Everybody's is 400 because.
I say it just covers it just like your continuing ed, because some of us started off at 300 hours for a police licensing, and some started us off 400 hours and so climbing, so it's like a grandfathered in, and then you just keep up with the continuing education.
A language that you could use would be that was accredited by the American Polygraph Association at the time they went through the school. Would be, if you
Then
wanted
I wouldn't be
to-
grandfathered.
Right.
Then I wouldn't be grandfathered in.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
Well, APP or APA. APA and both of them have always had the same, with the exception of whether or not the instructors had degrees. That's been the only.
And we won't tie it to a school. We want to set a standard that schools meet.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll use generic
And I
language.
think we could add a caveat to that. If it's not APA or APP, we could probably add or any governmental entity that administered a school with similar standards.
Yeah, because there's not anybody else out there that.
Because if somebody went to DACA or something, you understand what I'm saying?
They're doing the same thing.
Exactly, but it may not mean.
Would that pull in the feds though?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
DACA and all that other.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Their problem is if it were to go to, they get hired as a cop and they're now applying, getting a certificate from them sometimes is a problem because sometimes it's classified and how would they produce that? I don't know how they do that.
So when I go to FBINA and I get my certificate, my training hours there, and then I come back and I send it to y'all to get training hours, that's where I'm going, is how do we, these out of state people that have gone to training out of state, can they just, how would they be able to get it?
When we say who can get the certificate, I think that group's gonna have to talk about grandfathering and reciprocity is kind of the same thing, right? What is the commission exam and standard to apply if you didn't take one of the in-state approved courses?
So I'm envisioning an initial application process that's gonna have to be vetted with the training and certificates and all that. But once that's done, those folks, if they're not already have a T-code number, they'll probably get one. And then the certificates from those trainings going forward, they would just put that PID number in. That training would be submitted through those channels. Does that sound correct?
That's gonna capture most of it, as long as the training is acquired from somebody who reports to us.
Right, exactly.
So if, using
Civilians can have a PID
DPS
number.
as an example.
Yeah.
If DPS is the by and away largest provider of in-service continuing ed for polygraph operators, DPS Academy is already taking rosters and reporting on the back end to us. So what we would see when we look for compliance is we're looking for a series, a course or course numbers that we would, you know, because it's computer based. We're gonna make the computer look for the following courses. If this person has a polygraph certificate, then they must have these courses in this 2-year unit. If they don't, their certificate expires. If they do, their certificate self-renews. And
Right.
so that's, in our world, that's the simplest.
Okay.
The problem is if the sheriff sends somebody to Oklahoma City for their continuing ed, then that person has to come back to the sheriff. The sheriff has to report it on a department roster, because there is no, simplest way to put it, there's no license, there's no individual reporting mechanism.
So it's
And
like,
that's
it's saying like when you go
intentional.
to AAPP, you spend a week there.
So
transfer out
like
and
my
back.
school, I have no independent or would that part of this.
You would file, so when you define what a polygraph,
Who does it?
yes,
Okay,
um,
write that up.
and then they would have an initial code, what is it now? Do you know, Michelle, what it is right now? 4013. So that's what it would initially be, and then y'all may create another one for continuing education, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, numbers are cheap.
So that's, so that's what your school would meet the requirements for 4013. 4013 is what I'm gonna work on.
That's the
But the-
funding.
But would I be a provider reporting it, or would it go back through another agency?
That's a whole different contracting process. for the
I know, and
commission
I've
to
looked at
become
it,
a
it's
training
expensive
provider.
for whatever that's worth.
And so, there's two choices. You give you give your students everything they need to go back to their law enforcement agency. Because now we're restricted to our licensees. So they go back to the law enforcement agency and the agency can report it because it's called non-traditional training. You're not a provider. If you're a provider, you're obligated to report it. Agency can't, they shouldn't be, because that's how we get double reporting. But somebody goes to you, completes all your stuff, you give them a certificate with hours and their name and all the stuff required, they can run back to the constable and the constable enters it in on a one-person department roster under the appropriate number, we'll see it. And when they apply to us, we'll see it on their training record. You know, the problem is if we talk about the former CIA person who comes to Texas, wants to hang out a shingle, they have no identity with us. There would be an application process. If they are issued the certificate, they will have a PID number. Then they could go to continuing education providers who report to us, but it would have to be somebody with one of our contracts. If it was someone else, there's no reporting mechanism for that person.
Correct.
So that's some of the heartache on our end.
So you're currently not contracted, right?
No, it's an expensive process, it's
I
an
totally-
arduous process, trust me. You ain't making that up.
Intentionally.
My question on that is the actual testing phase. So if he's not reporting,
So that's what
how would they test?
I would do what I currently do, is I make a packet. Here's the curriculum, here's the hours, here's what we did, here's your certificate. I give it to them and they go back and they file it underneath their agency and
so
report it to us.
that's
Still
what
works out.
he's gotta make sure that when he defines the education, that he would meet those requirements.
From our perspective, and I checked with Gretchen on this, we don't have to have a state exam come to us and examine for this. But the rule needs to authorize approved training providers to do the test component. It becomes part of their authorized training, is they must test whatever the standard is. And people must pass that test. We would accept that as the state testing requirement under 1701. So we can work it either way. If you want us to have a test, then guess what? Y'all get to help us build it, maintain it, refresh it, deliver it.
There's no sense in recreating the wheel.
I concur.
You have anything else? Ed, you have anything?
No, I'm done.
You good, sir? You sure? I thought you were gonna save a question for me.
I'll say it later.
Do you have anything?
So for clarity, you're wanting us to bring a product or just a discussion back to you?
Prefer a product, because we do have a deadline.
Got a 6-month deadline from today, or about today,
This,
to get this completed.
tomorrow, this will be easy. I thought we were gonna
So
get
then we'll
some
be done next time.
I thought we were gonna get some good juicy stuff. I'm looking for this fight at the APA in a month.
Do y'all have anything else?
Just number 5 on the agenda, we have to call for public comment if there is any.
Are there any public comments?
And so the procedurally, I think Miranda has everybody's email and can send each subcommittee an email to try and coordinate when we meet virtually. Those won't have all the same in-person requirements.
Yeah, that's one thing about communication, I'll caution you, it's like emailing everybody on the subcommittee and going back and forth. Proper protocol is if you want the subcommittee to get something, you would email it to Miranda or TJ. And that's one of the ways you avoid a walking form. So send it to staff. If you want everybody to have it, staff can send it out. Subcommittees can communicate back and forth all they want, but you don't wanna start broaching the committee as a whole.
Miranda, do you have a list of the subcommittees?
Can you email that to me? Just so I have everyone's names written.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and do that real quick.
Who's with you?
I'll do two. We were doing certificate, but
Yeah.
I'll do two. I'm good.
I don't care.
Okay.
Well, I was thinking you and David,
Okay.
and then, so
However you want me to do this.
there'll be the committee on,
Who can do the training?
who can do the training, sorry. And then you have Pat and Bodie on certification. And you have Bobby, Josh, and Ed about continuing education.
And we, in our, God is not here. It's gonna help.
Yeah. I can let me email him, or
Email him and sign from the committee.
can you email Ramiro and see his involvement?
And as chair, you can assign him to a subcommittee at your will.
We'll put him on mine and see his involvement. And that's going off, an email he sent. Did he send it to me and you?
Yes.
That I don't know that HPD is gonna allow him to be very involved.
Can we get some help from y'all?
Well, they've been, they've had people involved in all of our other advisory
I don't-
committees.
I don't know if it was the change of date.
Maybe rank, because we had an executive chief on one of our committees, Jessica. So she's in Austin most of the time anyway.
So is there anything? Anything,
Any more public comment?
any more public comments? Good. Is there anything from y'all?
I think we're good.
Motion to adjourn if you want.
So I just want to clarify something. If we work on something, we send it to you, one of y'all to send out to everybody else.
Yeah, I think that's the best
Don't
way to
send
make
it
sure
to
you're
each
not.
other.
What I'm saying, yeah, she can share with whatever subcommittee
What is it
what
with
needs to be
Lisa?
said.
He's rubbing off on me.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Will they share meeting minutes and stuff with us too through Miranda?
Yes, yeah, have formal minutes.
Backing you now, he already yelled at me.
Yeah, just for process, both the draft minutes and the future agendas will go to the presiding officer and APO for approval prior to submission. So you guys will get the draft minutes, you give us a yes, no, changes made, then it'll be sent to everybody.
A second.
There's a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Josh.
Thank y'all.
Thank y'all.